Hi, my name's Chris Galazzi, and I'm here with James McGinnis and Kelly McGinnis. We're the founders of TechZenergy, and we wanted to tell you a little bit about how it came about that we began to develop a solution for biomed techs and why we feel this is a critical place for our skill set. James McGinnis really started the ball rolling about a year ago when he approached Kelly and me and described a problem he was seeing in his workplace. Maybe, James, you can pick it up from there.
Sure. So I've been in sales in some capacity or another for my whole career, and since 2000, I've been selling medical devices as mostly as an independent distributor of medical devices, which gives me access to lots of different products from lots of different manufacturers. During the past 2 years, I've been selling test equipment for medical devices directly into biomed shops in Colorado and Wyoming. And in the course of talking to people about the problems that they face and the needs that they have, it came to my attention that there's not a good way for a biomed tech to access all at the same time a piece of equipment, the manual for the equipment, the procedures to maintain the equipment, and the history of the maintenance on the equipment all at the same time on a screen, on a computer that's readily accessible from wherever they are. To give you an idea of the scope of that problem, there's a medium-sized hospital about 6 miles away from me called Good Samaritan Medical Center. In conversation with the biomed manager one day, I learned that they have 4,000 distinct model numbers of equipment for which they're responsible for doing preventative maintenance on an annual, sometimes biannual or quarterly basis, depending on the level of care that the equipment requires. For instance, a ventilator needs quarterly maintenance. An infusion pump for IVs requires annual maintenance. In that hospital with 4,000 distinct model numbers, they have 10,000 distinct serial numbers, so duplicates of some things and multiples of others. In 2008, the Centers for Medicaid Services, otherwise known as CMS, came up with an edict that said not only does the biomedical engineer or the department in the hospital have to prove that the equipment was maintained and by whom. So Bob did it on Tuesday, the 17th of June, but also as of 2008, hospitals were required to begin not only using for preventative maintenance the manufacturer's recommended maintenance procedures, but they also had to log what those procedures are, the pass-fail criteria for those procedures, and the results for each piece of equipment that they have responsibility for. This obviously got the biomedical community up in arms because, wow, how do we do that? And by the way, we don't always follow the manufacturer's procedures, and they're not necessary in some instances. We'd like not to have to follow that. So 5 years later, in 2013, the Centers for Medicaid Services, CMS, came out with another edict that said, okay, well, you still have to do all that stuff, but if you want to deviate from the manufacturer's specifications, that's fine. Give us a justification explaining why your procedure is better than their procedure is, some justification that makes what you're doing better than the manufacturer's recommended procedures. And they're allowed to do that for any device except an energy emitting device. So think X-ray machines, MRIs, CT scanners, lasers, things that put out radiation, essentially. Those manufacturers' recommendations have to be followed to a T. So in the course of trying to come up with that, the manager of clinical engineering, the biomed department at Good Sam, spent 4 months trying to get procedures into a usable form in a computer. And at the end of that 4 months, he had 7 procedures in place that somebody could access if they could get to them. Remember that this hospital has 4,000 pieces of individual equipment, 10,000 pieces of equipment overall. In 4 months, that facility was able to get 7 procedures in place, but still not in a usable place, because unless a tech had the login for the manager, he couldn't use those procedures. So what we came up with in Biomed TechZenergy is a cloud-based platform in which a tech can log in from any web-enabled device and find the piece of equipment that they're looking for, the manual or upload the manual, the procedures or build the procedures, and the procedure steps, and the ability to run the procedure all at the same time. You can build the procedure and run it at the same time for every piece of equipment. And every time the procedure is run, the history is collected, and it's forever locked into that serial number for that device. So if you think about it, there's a lot of work involved in just uploading manuals. For instance, at Good Samaritan Medical Center, they had a wall of 4 6-foot-tall, 4-foot-wide metal 2-door cabinets like you might find in the office supply section of any workplace, filled with manuals. As we were developing the prototype for this thing, they also gave us a drive that had 60 gigs of data on it. And in that drive, right, so think, 16 feet of metal shelves with disorganized manuals, and then think a 60 gig pile of paper. That's a giant pile of paper. Also disorganized. Multiple folders in the file, multiple manuals in different places in the file. Some manuals, things that were listed as manuals, were actually pieces of loose leaf paper saved as a PDF called a manual. Other manuals not found. No good way to organize, no good way to even name pieces of equipment, so that if I'm not Bob, who put the manual in there, if I'm Ted, and I have to find the piece of equipment or the manual for it, there's no standard nomenclature. So we put all that together. It's in its infancy now. It gets better every day. But let me give you a little sense of how important this product is to biomedical engineers. So I mentioned minutes ago that I've been selling medical devices specifically since about 2004, mostly as an independent rep. Well, since 2004, I've been an independent device rep. Every time any facility or manufacturer, rather, comes to me and says, "Hey, James, do you want to sell this thing that we have?" I say, "I don't know. Let me go find out." And I go out and I have 10 conversations, sometimes 15, with doctors, with operating room nurses, with scrub techs, with the people who would use the equipment. And I ask them, "Hey, what about this thing? Does this make sense to you?" And inevitably, in those first 10 conversations, 15, I get 3 people at least who say, "No, I don't need that. I have that covered. We're using this thing over here." And I say, "Okay, thanks." If I get more than half of the, well, half or more of the people that I talk to in my initial conversations who say, no, I'm not interested, I won't take the line. Usually about 3 no's is okay, I can overcome that. There's lots of reasons why people say no, mostly they're afraid of change. But let me just say that in over now 30 conversations with biomedical engineers and techs, with the managers of biomed operations, with the people who use biomedical equipment on the floor in hospitals and in operating rooms, the only response that I've gotten, at no time has anyone said, no, I don't need that, I have it covered. What I get is, wait, what? You're doing that? We need that today. So it's not, this isn't a question of is there value for this product? And it's not a question of is there a market for it? The question is how fast can we get it off the ground and into the cloud so that people can actually start using it. So the concept is strong. The website is built. The product as it exists today is usable, but it needs features on features on features. And while Chris is really intelligent and Kelly is unbelievably good at driving computers and making this thing happen, there are so many hours in a day, and all of them get filled up with everything, and we need help. So we're here today looking for partners. It's a pretty simple concept. The beginning of this thing is chunky. There's a lot of, we need programmers, we need testers, we need marketing support, we need legal support, the whole thing. And between the 3 of us, the resources just aren't there to move this thing along as quickly as it could. And regardless of when we get this thing up, and if there was anybody else, and there's not anybody else doing it, but if there was, what we're doing has a feature in it that's going to blow the doors off of anything else that's being put into the marketplace currently, and that feature is this. Once a piece of equipment is uploaded to our platform, that piece of equipment will be available, its manual and its procedures, but not the history, will be available to any tech who has the certifications and the responsibility for working on that specific piece of equipment. So for instance, I'm James and I work at St. Luke's Medical Center, and I upload the manual and the procedures for an infusion pump made by GE. If then Chris, right, and I'm in Colorado, by the way, if then Chris logs on and is vetted by our system and is given responsibility for that GE infusion pump, and he's in Boston, the equipment is there, the model number, the manufacturer, the manual, and the procedures for maintaining the device. Now, when Chris enters the serial number for his specific infusion pump, because that's different than the serial number for my specific infusion pump, the history, when Chris runs those procedures, will be collected in Chris's silo, and I won't be able to see it. And when I run my procedures, the information will be collected in my silo, and Chris won't be able to see the results or the history of my serial number. But we, as Biomed TechZenergy, will have access to the aggregate life cycle data of all of the equipment and all of the results. So for instance, that's important because one of the things that's important for us is to enlist manufacturers in uploading their manuals preemptively, which saves work at the beginning, and the procedure steps and vetting the procedure steps in the beginning. And in return for that, we can give the manufacturer life cycle data on their equipment. How often did the wheel fall off? Does the filter really get changed at 4 months, or does it clog up at 3? How often does the bolt get lost for the door because the hinge was loose? That helps the manufacturer because A, they can plan parts inventory, and B, they can hold up the real world results of what happens with a piece of their equipment against their expectations when they rolled out the piece of equipment in terms of its longevity, in terms of its robustness and its stability in the marketplace. And the reason that that matters is because not only is it critical for the device to work in the hospital, and not only does the hospital have liability and responsibility for making the thing work, but the device manufacturer has responsibility for putting out a product that actually does what they say it'll do and doesn't fail randomly and without warning.
And if you have any more questions, of course, you can always email us or call us, but you might start by looking at our website at www.TechZenergy.com and check out our bios, take a look at the information that we provided on our website, and we hope that you're as excited about this opportunity to improve preventative maintenance outcomes and ultimately patient experience along the food chain. And we look forward to hearing from you if you have further questions or would like to partner with us in any way. Thanks for checking us out.